Hi, everyone. This is Chapter 1 Career Counseling and Overview for Counseling 4480. All right, purpose of the book. Just to let you know, typically every textbook, Chapter 1 is kind of an overview, a review, just to let you know what you're going to cover throughout the whole entire semester. All right, so let's go through that. Understanding of elements of career counseling. So that might be vocabulary, terminology, which we hope that you'll start using as you start to talk in class as well as outside of class in your professional field. Hands-on practical examples of how to apply career development theories to career counseling clients. So that one is we're going to start to learn about all the ways that psychologists and people who are professionals in the field understand why we do the work that we do. Okay, so why do we choose this job? Is it because it pays a lot and we feel good because it allows us to buy things? Or is it something that you're really passionate about and you don't really care that, you don't make any money? Obviously, we're going to hope that you're going to love the field and make a lot of money as you go into this world, but you will be encountering people who might have different value sets than you do, right? And those are all the theories behind it. Career interventions in a variety of settings. So, what happens when you have a client who's coming in thinking about exploring new work, right? And then appreciation of the overall importance of work in people's lives. Part 1 is the foundational materials related to ethics. So, ethics is basically what you are supposed to do and not do in terms of the field of counseling or the field of psychology that you're going to work with when you work with your clients. Okay, every profession has their own code of ethics, so there's certain things like in psychology and in counseling that you are not supposed to do, and we'll be talking a little bit about that soon. Then there's professional settings. So where are you going to be able to do career counseling? Cultural contexts that underlie career counseling. So, depending on what culture you grew up with, you might have different value sets when it comes to work. Some might not necessarily value it as much, or maybe value certain types of jobs more than others, right? So, that's going to also play an influence as well. There's also assessments in career counseling. So, assessments are basically questionnaires and surveys, tests sometimes as well, where we're going to start to learn a little bit about, what are your results, right? Like we can sit there and ask the client all these questions, or we can just have them fill out that questionnaire, have it analyzed so that we know what kind of responses they have, and maybe even with all the technology that we have, what software, computer, websites and stuff like that, that can help guide them to explore more about work. Part 2 is about theories and how counselors view and work with their clients. So now that's a little bit more applied to the professional side of you, right? There's going to be personal reflection that we're asking you to have. So that means just respond, react to the things that you're learning. How do you feel? How do you process all this stuff? Because when you introduce this information to your clients, they're going to also feel the same way. So you're going to, be able to be empathetic potentially, right? And also really connect with your clients. Counselors' thoughts from the theoretical perspective as well. So we're going to talk about how some people, depending on the generation, might see careers in a certain way because of a theory, and then might see work in a different way now, right? So choices or lack of choices are shaped by your gender, your family, whether or not you have a disability, sexual orientation, social class, and culture. This is what we call intersectionality, right? We are a combination of all of those things. And so it is important that you realize that your combination makes you your unique self. Your clients will have their own combination. So, for example, here, gender, if we say that you identify as female, then maybe your choices of careers might be limited, right? Let's say, for example, and this is just a stereotype, that you are a female and you want to become a firefighter. People might go, that's not really a female type of job. And obviously there are female firefighters now, but it's very limited. And the reason why we're talking about that is the reality is that there are places that will limit you and your options because of your gender or any of the other identities that we're talking about here. So just put that in the back of your head, your mind, as you're going through to decide how you became who you are when it comes to careers. There's also affects and influences your schooling. Do you have schooling or not, right? If you talk about Or you hear about immigrant parents who do not have a large amount of education. They might see work in schooling in a really different way. They don't understand technology. So when you said that you're going to study computer science, they're like, what is that, right? Whereas if you are, let's say, working at a warehouse, they're like, we know that that is work. We understand what you're doing there, right? But when you're talking about, coding, they're going to go, what is that? Or work in AI. All right, there's also access to resources. That depends on where you are, who you are. Obviously, at a school, you're going to have some access to technology, computers, and also a wealth of people who could be able to help you get a job or explore your ideas about work. There's also interactions with the larger environment as well. So that means about society. So think about where we are right now politically. That could influence you in whether or not you want to work in a certain field or not. Here's an example. A Latina high school student, traditional Mexican American family, lives in an affluent basically means well off, wealthy, a suburb of Los Angeles. So career choices will be shaped by her gender, family cultural values. So do they value school or not? Expectations of her post high school decision. So what is she expected to do? Get married and have kids, or to maybe become independent financially and in other ways as well. So the degree of affluence, beliefs about gender and work, and schools in their community will play a really big influence. Does she accept her family's expectations and her ability to navigate expectations from her peers, her parents, and her teachers? Family may want to limit her options of what they would approve. So they might say, if you go to college, we'll pay for it, but you have to study certain things, right? So the counselor at school may also say, dream big, but you are yourself, you know who you are. So they can say, be who you want to be. That's because they want you to be optimistic and not necessarily say no to things before understanding what it is, right? So don't just say, well, my counselor says dream big, I can be anything. No, not necessarily, because of your, again, all the things that we just talked about, your intersectionalities can limit your abilities to become a certain thing, right? Like, for example, I love space and it would be kind of cool to be an astronaut, but I don't know if I'm that smart, right? Uh, and also, I don't know if I'm that fit when it comes to becoming an astronaut. I don't know if I can dedicate all that time to doing that, although I really, really love it. So there are going to be limits, and we have to be realistic about this, as well as with our clients. And we'll learn how to talk to our clients and help them realize these things as well. Work and career counseling. The Merriam-Webster dictionary explains work as activity that a person engages in regularly to earn a livelihood. Earn a livelihood basically means to make money and to survive and to live. Do you think work is a critical part of the lives of most adults in the US? What do you think? Personally, for me, I do think so, because I'm always curious about what kind of work you do. Not because I want to look down or look up on to you. It kind of explains to me potentially certain things about you, like behavior wise, maybe, or maybe that will make me be able to think of certain things to talk about with you at a party. But I know that now sometimes some people will think that it's rude to ask about what you do for work because of the pandemic or because of the recessions that we have gone through or whatever it is that's going on in society. So some people don't, right? For me personally, I still, but again, if you don't, that's totally fine too. We all think, do we work or not? Right? We probably all thought about that in high school. What work do you do? What work are you gonna do? How to prepare for that work? Do you need to go to school? Whether to change jobs or careers, and how to cope with the loss of work. So with those two things, it's kind of like you're deciding what you need to do next, right? So there's a lot of anxiety that some people might also feel when they are going to start working. Do they stay at a job that they're unhappy with because of the money? Or maybe people are not hiring a lot, so I have to stay here even though I'm very, very unhappy, right? So those are the psychology parts that we're going to talk about and explore throughout the semester as well. Okay, so now that you are a professional in this field, counselors can help with the previous slide questions, but also the following questions. help decide between two or more choices. So let's say you got two job offers or two school offers. Let's figure out how to decide which one might be the best one. Obviously, sometimes we make the wrong decision, but it's okay. We're still going to be alive, hopefully, right? And then we'll continue on. But we want to explore all of the potentialities so that we make the best decision for ourselves that we can, right? But again, nothing is ever 100%. Right, learning how to make your own decisions, finding more satisfying work, finding work in general, coping with the loss of work, so people who are laid off or fired, right, or quit. All those things can psychologically affect your mind, and then also affect whether or not you're going to be able to find the next job or how long it takes. Sometimes people think that you can just get a job within a minute or two, but I always give myself 3 months to find a job. For me, the reality is that's what's going to happen. All right. By the time a person retires at 65, they have worked about 80,000 hours. Isn't that crazy? But not crazy at the same time. I mean, how much time do you spend on your TikToks, right? Maybe another 80,000 hours? I don't know. All right. Work is survival, power, a way to connect to others, self-determination. Self-determination basically means becoming who you want to be, right? And then a way to express interests and passions, which is why I was talking about when I go to a party and I ask people, what they do for a living, it helps me understand what their interests and their passions are. At least that's what I think anyways. All right, Frank Parsons' book, Choosing a Vocation. In the wise choice of a vocation, there are 3 broad factors. So this is what Frank Parson, you got to remember who he is, believes in when it comes to vocation or jobs, right, or careers. A clear understanding of yourself. So again, like I said before, you're learning who you are as you're going through college, and I hope that you'll find yourself. You don't have to find yourself exactly who you are right now, right? But you should be on that journey, or in school, talking to other people and stuff like that. 2, knowledge of the requirements in different lines of work. So that means if you want to become, let's say, a scientist, what kind of scientist do you need to, what kind of science are you going to learn? But also, what are the degrees or the departments and stuff that you need to study, right? Let's say that you want to become a ceramicist, which is basically working with clay, right? Or in sculptures and stuff like that. What do you need to have, to know, to do, to experience, to be able to go into that field? 3 is true reasoning on the relations of these 2 groups of facts. So you got to combine those 2 things together and understand how they play off of each other. All right, next one is help engage in self-analysis. Again, trying to get to know yourself. Uncover their preferences. Again, trying to get to know yourself. Provide guidance and analysis, outlook of the options available. So let's look and see whether or not underwater basket weaving is going to be a big job in 2026 or 2027, right? Those are things that we want to know, whether or not a lot of people are going to want to hire in that field. Obviously, if you said that you want to become a VHS repair person, we don't do VHSs anymore, right? VHSs are like pre-Netflix. So most people are not going to want to study that or go into that field. So that's what we're talking about when it comes to the outlook. Advice on how to find a job. So again, this is what a career counselor can also help you do or offer. When you become a professional, that's what you're going to do. Career counselors as a profession is influenced by the economic structure, and then also how to enter and be successful within that structure. Okay, so right now there are many people who are unemployed, which means that there is a need for that in this field, because there are a lot of people who are considering what to do next because they hear about the fears of AI taking over your jobs or whatever. So again, within this economic structure, we're going to analyze a little bit about that. All right, historically, people decided what they should do at an early age, and they should stay, or they would stay at that same job for the rest of their lives. Today, a lot of people change jobs all the time. So think about who you are as a person right now, right? Do you think that you're going to be changing your jobs a lot? And what are the pros and cons to that, right? You might be able to get away from people that you might not like to work with. You might get a little bit better pay, maybe a lot better pay. I don't know. Whereas a person who's going to stay at the same job for the rest of their lives. I'm an older Gen X person, so I was raised with, you get a job and you stay with it for the rest of your life. Obviously, that's not happened to me because of the world, right? But, a lot of people do stay longer, right? Boomers, you hear about that, doing that quite a bit. And some of you all, even if you're Gen Z or whatever, are maybe going to do the same thing as well. Again, it really depends on each person. But the culture of Gen Z right now, and maybe even millennials, is if I don't like this job, I'm leaving. I need to find that perfect work home balance. Whereas other people are like, I just need to work so that I can pay my bills and then live my life on the side with not, that's not involved with work. So again, it really depends on each person that you're going to talk about. So think about that. Neither one is good or bad, right? It's depending on who you are as a person and your personality. So start thinking about that. All right. After World War II, corporations had hierarchies and specialists, which meant that choosing a career was very important. So what that basically means is, during this time period, like the workplace started to really evolve, and bigger companies started to evolve. And within bigger companies, you're going to need different positions to make sure that everything is working and flowing smoothly, and stuff like that. So that means, like, are you going to be an entry person? Are you going to be a manager? Are you going to be a vice president? All those things started to be created. And that's what we see now, right? Where everyone has kind of a position and a role. Do we have too many? Maybe. Some people would argue and say that there's way too many positions, whereas other people might say, no, it's fine. So it really, again, depends on the situation. But during the World War II, which is in the early 1900s, like 1940s, 30s, 40s, and stuff like that, and we're talking about afterwards. So after that period is when corporations and companies started to really have really big companies and have lots of responsibilities. All right, in the 1950s, the US and the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union is like Russia, Ukraine, a bunch of all these countries that used to be under one thing, and then they broke up, which is why now we have Russia and Ukraine and other countries as well over there, Belarus, Yugoslavia, and stuff like that. So back then, though, it was a big old country, right? The Soviet Union and the US. And we used to really compete on science and stuff like that because we wanted to be better than the other. Okay, there was a lot of competition. Money spent on guidance programs so that specialists could be created as competition to other countries. So one of those things is who is going to get to the moon first. That was one of those things, right? Or satellites. If we have satellites in the sky, how could that benefit us? And so America was really competitive with, at that moment, the Soviet Union to be, one be better than the other. 1980s, shifting towards psychology, help make good career choices, but also getting therapy. Greater focus on personal identity and meaning. So in the 1980s now, we're talking about understanding why we do the work that we do and does that make us happy? Okay. And so that is very important for some of you all. In the 1990s, influence for work differs across each person because now we started to talk about multiculturalism. Okay. Hey, you might want to be a job as a firefighter, but back then, if you were Black or African American, you were not able to apply for the job. Or if you applied for the job, no one was going to hire you anyways because of discrimination, right? Or race, gender, or when we're talking about race, gender, culture, social class, or sexual orientation. Think about all the jobs that, people would say, I don't think a gay person should be able to do this job, right? So now we're starting to address those things in the 1990s. Some of these things apply to you, some of them don't, right? But again, this intersectionality is something that is important, and also you're going to see it with your clients in the future. So you need to be able to talk about it comfortably. All right, so today we need to understand career development, provide individual and group counseling skills in a culturally appropriate way. So that means being respectful. Provide individual and group assessments. So some of you all will be giving out tests. And then you need to explain to your clients how to do those things and what do the results really mean, right? Provide occupational information in a culturally sensitive way. Provide career programs for diverse populations. So think about this. Some of your clients will not know how to read really well. So if there are a lot of surveys that they need to read to answer, how's that going to work? You got to think about those things, right? Because we want to be inclusive of everyone, whether or not they have been educated or not. Okay. Provide career programs for diverse populations, provide coaching and consultation in a culturally appropriate manner, engage in culturally appropriate supervision, act ethically and legally appropriate, able to design and implement culturally appropriate research studies as well. So for some of y'all, you might actually do studies to understand your population even better. So then that could be an area of career counseling that you can go into. Changing world of work. So the info from the U.S. Census Bureau of 2018 says that the workforce has become increasingly diverse. So that basically means is women start to work more in the field as well. They're not necessarily just staying at home and being mothers and stuff like that. Women, 47% of the total workforce. In 1979, women's wages were about 62 cents to the man's dollar. And then in 2016, the woman's wage is now 82 cents to the dollar, to the man's dollar. So that means there's a 20 cents increase. So what basically that means is even though a male and a female are, let's say, working the same job, if the male is making $100,000 a year, the woman, even though she's doing the exact same job, is only going to make $82,000. And that is because of gender biases right there. And we need to remember that this is 82 cents as in white women, okay? When it becomes a minority woman, it becomes even less than that. And this is something that you might not realize when you're doing your lower end jobs as a youngster, let's say working at McDonald's or something like that. But as you start to work in more corporate places, you will realize that that is actually a reality, okay? And this is why for some companies, they are keeping people's salaries secret, right? Because they don't want people to know, because then will mean that women would start to demand the same amount of money, okay? And why is that happening? You know, that's something that we need to all think about collectively when it comes to how people see genders and stuff like that. All right. In terms of population when working, it says that we're talking about in terms of the breakdown of ethnicities, white is about 78%, black is 13%, Asian is 6%, and ethnicity-wise, Latino is 17%. So those are just population numbers as of the 2018-2020 Census Bureau record data. Women and minorities are more likely to be in lower paying occupations. Again, is it because minorities want to be paid less? No, there probably is a more layered conversation to have about discrimination, right? All right, baby boomers are aging. Yes, they are. Employee loyalty in exchange for job security and retirement benefits. So like we talked about before with baby boomers is, you know, once they get a job, they're like, I'm going to stay here. So the company rewards them for staying because it is really expensive to have a high turnover of job employees and stuff like that. Because you have to think about putting out an ad, losing money, hiring a bunch of people to interview them, make sure the paperwork is done, all that stuff, train them, and during that training period, probably they're not going to be making a lot of money for the company, right? So people who stay in the same place tend to be rewarded back then. Maybe it's still happening now. Shifts in the 1990s and the 2000s, that's when baby boomer attitudes like this, where people are staying longer, are starting to change. And part of that is because of this new revolution in technology, okay? Things are changing, shifting because of that, but along with other things as well. 27.2% of Americans report having a disability. 17.6% have severe disabilities. Okay, so again, nothing wrong with that at all, but that means that there's going to probably be some challenges in that area. Some of you all may never have worked with someone who had a disability before, so you're going to realize that certain things need to be done differently. The job will still be done, right? But you might have to alter the environment a little bit. Let's say a person in a wheelchair and there's no elevator to the second floor, it's only stairs. You know, what happens there, right? What happens if someone does not have a hand? You know, how are they going to type? they're probably going to be able to still type, right? They just need some accommodations that are needed. Fewer than half of 27.2% are actually employed. So when we talk about race and discrimination, the same thing is happening with people with disabilities is that, they might apply for a job and they can totally do that job, but because of how they look maybe and how the interviewer or whatever perceives it, they might not hire them, right? So again, because of that discrimination, the fear and stigma of disability, less people with disabilities are being hired, even though they can do the job. And of course, disability increases with age. As you get older, your sight goes away, right? Slowly, hopefully. But then also your body starts to ache. You might develop certain types of disabilities, and that is the truth. So as you get older, more likely that you're going to also develop disabilities. So what does that mean as an older person working in this field when your back starts to hurt a lot and you're in construction? Globalization now. So globalization is just a fancy word for basically saying is companies no longer work within their own countries, they work all over the world. So let's say, for example, Walmart. Walmart gets their stuff from China, from Vietnam, from Bangladesh, all different countries, all over the world. So what that is saying is that a company no longer works within itself in its own country, but now it needs to manage all these different people. And what does that mean? Right? Does it mean moral issues are going to be ignored? So let's say, for example, the thing that's probably really popular is like Shein, right? That company Shein. People say, the employees or the workers who make the clothes are not being treated really well. So then what is it up to us to decide whether or not we should buy it or not buy it and stuff like that, right? So does Walmart say, hey, you got to treat the people better there? Or hey, we're not going to even acknowledge it. We're going to pretend like that's not our concern, right? So that becomes a major issue in conversation when it comes to work as well. Global competition and economic recession, restructuring of their organizations. So you saw that during the pandemic, right? Things started to blow up in certain stores and then other stores started to close down. So it really does depend because people are competing. Like for example, Temu, right? A lot of y'all probably are ordering stuff from Temu now because it's so cheap. So that means that Walmart, Target has to compete with Temu. All right. There are smaller businesses now, fewer obligations to provide benefits or job security because, again, all these things are changing in flux, right? They might hire people for part-time as opposed to full-time. And what does that mean when it comes to healthcare or whatever else when it comes to when it is involving payments? So now it's on the person to adapt. So now you start working. Maybe you're going to start doing gig jobs. Gig jobs are kind of jobs that you do like when it's needed. So such things as Uber or DoorDash and stuff like that. Those are considered gig economy jobs. They have no benefits in the sense of health benefits or retirement or any of those things. You're just doing it on the side to make a living, hopefully. Okay. Find new work through their lifetime. So again, we talked a little bit about the fact that people leave jobs all the time now, and then save for their own retirement. So instead of your company helping you with your retirement, maybe you should start working on saving your own for yourself, right? Obviously, there are pros and cons when it comes to that as well, because of how much money can you put into it? What happens when you don't have health insurance and then you get sick? You might lose all of it, right? So again, pros and cons in every type of discussion. Young work may like the freedom of change while boomers do not. Again, pros and cons. Do you want like a stable salary every month, or are you willing to kind of change it up and down? Let's say doing gig economy jobs like driving for Uber. Okay, let's talk about the definition and types of theories. Theories help us understand the very complex sets of information about how humans behave to help us understand them and to predict their behavior in the future. None of these theories explain all work-related behavior, so it can look distorted. Different variables are included while others are omitted. Some make assumptions about the internal conditions that are not observable. So let's break this down really quickly, okay? So there are different theories when it comes to work and why people want to do it. Some people might think that your, let's say, gender is a big deal, right? So there might be gender-based theories about work. Whereas other people are like, no, gender doesn't mean anything. It's really about your education, right? So there might be education-based theories on work. So that's what this is all saying, is that we need to study a little bit of all of them. And that's what we're going to present are some of the most powerful or the most popular theories when it comes to work in this semester of this course. Okay, so everyone will have their own theory. They're grounded by how they see the world. So how do you see the world? You might agree on certain theories while you might disagree, but it doesn't mean that you should not learn about those theories. You need to also understand why other people might behave in a different way. Clarifying distinctions between theories and theoretical orientations. So, theoretical orientations is a general philosophical stance about the nature of personality and of therapeutic change. So, it sees it as humanistic or cognitive behavioral or family systems. Those are all different types of theories in psychology. Okay, so we're talking about like kind of the general, like how do you see the world, and then maybe this will influence how you see work. Career development theories explain vocational behavior, initial career choices, work adjustment, and lifespan career progress. So when you talk about career development theories, you're talking about what happens in the psychology of work. So how did they decide the first job that they were looking for, or how did they decide that what they want to be? What happens when they need to change their job or change certain things about their job or change complete careers? Why is that happening? Right? And then lifespan career progress. Whenever you hear the word lifespan, it means kind of like life to death. So that means what happens as you start to get older, right? You start to change your career paths, maybe, right? And then career counseling theories is to provide counselors with a direction for how to work with the client. So you kind of combine those two things together, and then you help your client, right? Depending on who they are, once you get to know them a little bit better, you'll understand what motivates them. And from there, you apply the things that you learned in this class as well as counseling theories. And then from there, you're going to be able to work with them, and hopefully you'll be effective. All right, that's the end of this chapter. Thank you.